Let's now render the search results by creating a new view. So we already have the search view, but now we also want to create like a results view. So a results view which will contain a render so that we can then call that render here with these search results. So similar to what we have here, so to the recipe view, which also has a render method which takes in some data. And so now, again, we want the same for a results view. So we also wanted to have a render method which takes in data and which is then rendered to our user interface. So let's create the results view.js. So results view. And so now this view will actually be pretty similar to the recipe view. So we don't need that one anymore. But now, again, this one is going to be very similar. So we will have a parent element, data, these messages. We will basically also need the same render method, the same render spinner. So we will need to display the spinner while the data is being fetched. So in this case, the search results. We might need to also render an error. And so now it's time to basically refactor this code and create a parent class. So I had mentioned that before, but now it's actually time to do it. Because by creating a parent class, we will then be able to reuse all of these methods on all the views. So basically on all the objects that are created through all the view classes. So let's create yet another file here. And I'm calling it view.js. And so let's create a new class here called view. And so we will then export immediately this class. And actually, let's make it a default export. So this time we are actually exporting the class itself because, of course, we are not going to create any instance of this view. We will only use it as a parent class of these other child views. All right. Here in the recipe view, let's now import that parent class. So import view as, or actually not as, but from view. And actually we don't even need the JS, but I like to keep it there for consistency. And so now all we need to do is to basically copy everything that should be common to all the views to that parent class. However, there is one thing that we still need to change here. And that is that right now, with Parcel and Babel, inheritance between these truly private fields and methods doesn't really work yet. So here it was nice to actually use the native way of JavaScript of protected methods and properties, but now we cannot really use it anymore. So maybe that might be possible at some point in the future, but for now, we will have to go back to protected fields and protected methods. So let's basically select all of these hash symbols. And actually, I will select them like this. So with the dot, because otherwise that will also select these ones. So hitting Command D here a couple of times. And then replace it with dot underscore. And now we just have to change these method names. So changing from truly private to only protected using the underscore convention. And then the same right here. Okay. So now our code should still be working. It says here connection lost, but indeed our code keeps working here. Okay, let's just check out the search view. And so let's use the same convention here as well. Okay. Just here as well. And now here we also converted everything successfully. But anyway, let's now basically extract the view class from this recipe view. So what we need in all the views is this render method, then this one as well, this one, and basically everything except for generating the markup, because that of course is going to be unique to every single view, right? And also adding the handler. But everything else we want to be the same on all the views. For example, rendering the spinner will be really easy. So all the views will simply have this method, and we will then be able to call it on that method. And thanks to the parent element property here, it will then know exactly to which element it should attach the spinner. Because again, the parent element, of course, will be unique to each single view. So the parent element will be unique, the message, so these two messages, but this data can actually also be on the parent. So let's copy all of this here, or actually cut. So everything except for adding the handlers and generating the markup. So let's put that here. And here we of course then need to extend this one. So extends view, right? And so let's see if we have everything still in place. Yeah, so I'm confident that this will work now. So let's see. Oh, and icons is not defined. So let's go back here to our view where we will have to copy this one. Because here, of course, we are also using the icons. Okay, but here it is. All right, so we successfully extracted the view class from the recipe view. And now all that's left here is really what is unique to this view. And so this makes this even easier to work with, in my opinion. Because now let's see what we can do here. So even without any code yet in the results view, we will already be able to add a spinner to the search results. All right. Well, we cannot really leave it empty. We still need actually the parent element here. All right. And we also need to import the view. So import view, and then this is just another child class of view. Then here we need to say that parent element should be, well, something, and let's check out what it actually should be. So here in index, let's see. So it's this here. So this result element, so this unordered list. All right. And then basically each of the search results will be one of these preview elements. But more about that later. So for now, let's just set the parent element to this results elements here in result view. So document.query selector results. And then we have to export default just like before, and then a new instance of this view. And so this way there can only be one results view. And then here in the controller, we can immediately import that without having to create the instance here manually. So that's results view like this. And so now here we should already be able to load the spinner, or actually to display the spinner. So let's do that at the very beginning. So results view dot render spinner, and let's see what happens. So pizza, and here is a small error. And so let's once again do some debugging here. And I hope that you can appreciate that I'm actually not cutting out all these like small debugging sessions so that you can actually see what I'm doing here. But anyway, apparently the problem appears here in Vue.js at line 14. So right here, so it seems like it cannot find the parent element. So let's simply log that to the console. So this here is the result of doing that for the view. And now let's see. So now that is undefined. So to me, it seems like here we selected the wrong element here, maybe. So results. So that should actually be correct. And so should the name. So I think parent element is correctly spelled. Oh, but it's actually called parent element all written out. Okay. So you see it's actually called parent element like this. For some reason I thought it was called just like the abbreviation. Ah, and you see here is the nice loading spinner spinning away here in our search results, right? And again, all without writing any new code for displaying that spinner here in the results view, because it is now simply inheriting that method, so that render spinner method from its parent class. So let's get rid of this. And just for the sake of curiosity, let's actually take a look at this results view. So just so we can see the whole prototype chain here in the console. So for that, we need that controller to run. And so here it is. So you see that we have still some undefined data. Then we have the parent element, so the one we selected. And then we get, well, right now we don't have any methods in the class already, but we do have methods in the parent class. And so these are the ones, right? So the render one that we're going to use next, then render error and spinner and message. So it's always good to remember these things so that we still know how everything actually works behind the scenes. But now it's actually time to create basically this generate markup method also in the results view. Okay, so all the child views should have this method here, because in the view, the render method then actually relies on that. Okay, so this dot generate markup needs to exist in order for the render method then being able to create the markup and render it, or to insert that HTML into the DOM. And so let's take that, just that name, and create that right here. So as always, add template, literal, and then now it's time to actually get this code here. Okay, and this here is called a preview because we will actually use the same thing later here to render the bookmarks. So that's going to be a nice trick, but we will save that for the future. Okay, some more indentation here on all of this to make it look great. And so now we need to take our data and actually put that right here. Now, where actually is that search results data? So with all of this structure, it might be a little bit hard to follow where that data is. So let me actually start by calling the render method here. So here, besides of simply logging the search results, we now also want results view dot render, because of course, just like render spinner, the results view also inherits render, and then into that we pass whatever we want to be rendered. And so that is all of this. Okay. And then in the render, here we see that it takes this data and puts it into this .data. And so here, if we then take a look at the results view, let's simply log that then to the console. So this .data. And so this .data here should basically be exactly this search results. So let's see. And it is. So you see that twice we now get this array. And you also see that it already printed something here to the results. So that is that pre-formatted HTML that we already created here. So it's already basically this HTML, right? Because this method here is already returning that. And so then the view takes that data and renders it on the user interface. Okay. And so let's now actually create this method. Now, this is actually an array now. And so here we need to loop over that array. So in fact, we don't want to return simply this, but instead we want to return a whole string which contains like one of these elements for each of the search results in the array. So we will return basically this .data, and then we map over it. Remember? So we did that before with the ingredients. And then at the end, we join everything together. And so then that will be the string that we return here. Now, we could now go ahead and put this code here into the map function, but instead I will create just another method down here to make this a little bit cleaner. Let me copy this name, preview. And I'm simply calling it this because that's also the class name. So let's put this one here. And so then here we can call the method. Oh, what was that? So we can call it right here then. And so now this should like print 50 or 60 of the same. So just to see if it works. And indeed, here it is. So 59 results, and so it prints this 59 times right here now. Right? Now all we need to do is to fill it with the real data. So with the ID, image, publisher, and title. Okay? So to start, we need the ID here in order to build the link. And so then when we click the link, that will change the hash in the URL, which in turn will trigger loading a recipe. So that's what we did by the beginning of this section. Now here we need to pass in the result then. And so here that is result.id. Then here it's the image. So .image, here it's the title. And then here, the publisher. Okay. Now, here we also need to replace the icons. So we will need, again, the icons right here. We will probably need them in all of them. So but that should be it. And it works. Beautiful. So we get all of these search results here. We just have to fix some small details. But you see that it's already working. And now let's click on one of them. And it works. Minimizing this a little bit. And so you see that now we get exactly the recipe that we are clicking on here. So watch what happens with the ID when I click here on pizza casserole or casseroli or whatever. So it changed the ID up there and changed the recipe here also in the view. Great. Now let's just fix this icon here, and actually also here. And then also all of these should not be highlighted. We will take care of that a little bit later. So we need to take away this class here of active. And here we also need to take away this. Okay, and we will come back to this later again when we actually start to implement uploading our own recipes. And here in the alt text, we should just put that title as well. Okay, now you see that actually the state that we had here before in the page is gone. And so let's activate that hot module reloading that I mentioned in the last section. So remember that with Parcel, we can do this. So if module.hot, then module.hot.accept. All right. And again, this is not real JavaScript, at least this module.hot. This is simply coming from Parcel. All right. And now finally, let's also delete these fake links that we had before. Let's reload. And that looks a lot better. Okay, so let me now change something in the code. For example, getting rid of this console.log here. And so previously that would then reload the entire page. But now as we go back, you see that the state here actually remains. All right, all it says is the console was cleared, but that's it. So the rest remains the same. And we can now also delete this user icon from the recipe view. So let's see where that is. It is simply this div here. And so once again, it will now not re-render everything. Well, maybe we should re-render. And yeah, now it's gone. Well, it also messed up our button here for some reason. So maybe that was not intended. Maybe I should just remove this here. So basically keeping an empty div. Okay, so for the time being, let's just leave it like this. Okay, now let's just see what happens when we search something that for sure does not exist. So you see that here we still get a success. You see? So we still get that data, but the only difference is that the recipes array is now empty. And here we also see that the array is empty coming from the state. So in this case, we actually want to render like an error message here saying that there was no results for that query. So let's start by creating also the error message property here. So let's copy these two actually to our results view. And here let's say no recipes found for your query. Please try again. But now, how exactly will we actually display this error message on the parent element? So we could do that right here in generate markup and basically check if the array is empty, and if it is so, then render the error message. So that would work. However, we can also do that directly in the render method. So automatically right as we receive the data. And I believe that is what makes more sense. So right in the beginning, when the render method is first called and receives the data for the first time, we can immediately check if that data actually exists. So right now, we only simply assumed that there always is data and that we can then generate some markup with that data. But as always, it's a good idea to check if the data actually exists. And that is true no matter if we receive a simple object or if we receive an entire array of objects, which is the case of the results. So let's add a guard clause here. So if there is no data, then we want to return immediately, and we also want to render the error. So we can do that all in one line, and this will then still work. So this dot render error, and we actually don't even have to pass in any message because we already automatically get the message from this dot error message. And so in this case, that is going to be this one that we just specified before, right? Now, however, in this case, this check is actually not enough because in fact, we do get data. It's just an empty array. And so in this case, we also want to treat the empty array as though we had no data. So this here basically only works for undefined or for null. But now we also want to check if the received data is an array and if it is empty. So we can do that by saying, so if there is no data or, and then basically if the data is an array and if it's empty. And we can do that by using a helper function that is on the array constructor, which is array. So we can check that. And so if it's an array and the length of the array is 0, basically, data.length 0, well, then in this case, exit this function immediately and also render the error. Okay? So again, if there is no data, or if there is data, but that data is an array and it is empty. So in both these cases, we want the error to be shown. So let's check that. So with pizza, it all works the same because there are results. But now with this, there are no results, and then we get our error message. So, great. That works. And so I think we are done actually with this part. So just one more look at our flowchart. So we implemented the event that the user searches, we asynchronously loaded the search results, and then we also rendered them to our user interface. And so with that, we are done, right? Just a final look here at the controller, but everything looks good. So in the next lecture, we will actually take care of the problem that we have these 59 results all one after another here. So that's not good. And so we will implement pagination in the next 2 lectures.